Good evening, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum at the Institute of Politics. My name is Emmanuel Edwards. I'm a sophomore studying economics at the college, and I'm a member of the JFK Jr. Forum Committee. Before we begin, please note the exit doors, which are located on both the park side and the street side of the forum. In the event of an emergency, walk to the exit closest to you and congregate in JFK Park. Please also take a moment now to silence your cell phones, and join me in welcoming Harvard College undergraduate Camilla Cruz.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum here at the Institute of Politics. My name is Camilla Cruz, and I'm a junior at the college studying social studies and philosophy. I'm also a member of the JFK Jr. Forum Committee. Tonight, we have the distinct privilege of hosting a conversation with our distinguished guest, U.S. Senator Rick Scott. Rick Scott is a United States Senator representing Florida since 2019. He previously served as the 45th governor of Florida from 2011 to 2019, during which he focused on issues such as job creation, economic development, and disaster preparedness. Prior to entering office, Scott was involved in the healthcare industry, co-founding Columbia Hospital Corporation, which later became part of the largest for-profit healthcare company in the nation at the time. Throughout his career in both the private and public sectors, he has emphasized budgetary discipline, infrastructure investment, and support for military and veteran communities. As a senator, Scott serves on several committees and continues to advocate for policies aimed at fostering economic growth, improving healthcare systems, and strengthening national security, while engaging in ongoing legislative efforts that impact both Florida and the broader United States. He also signed my perfect reading score on the 5th grade Florida Standards Assessment. Thank you. This conversation will be moderated by Jason Furman, the Aetna Professor of Practice of Economic Policy at Harvard University. He served as the 28th chair of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Barack Obama from 2013 to 2017, acting as the president's chief economist and a member of the cabinet. He is also a non-resident senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Furman's academic and policy work spans macroeconomics, fiscal policy, labor markets, and competition policy. He regularly contributes to public discourse through writing in outlets like the Wall Street Journal and Project Syndicate. A Harvard alumnus with degrees in social studies, government, and economics, Furman also holds an MSc from the London School of Economics. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Senator Rick Scott and Professor Jason Furman to the forum.
Okay. Well, Senator, thanks for being here. Thanks to all of you for being here. And we are going to have a completely, largely unscripted and unplanned conversation, just what I would want to talk to you about, but with some other people present, if that was okay.
Sounds good.
I am a card-carrying economist. I admit that I suffer from tariff derangement syndrome. Wanted to get your sense of what you thought of this.
Right.
And in particular, they seem to change their tariff policy from time to time. Do you think there's a method to that, what looks to me like madness?
We all hope so, right? All right, well, first off, let me just tell you why, how I come to how I believe about all these things. So I grew up in the Midwest, born to a single mom. I have an adopted father. My parents, we lived in public housing. And I grew up in a country where my parents could legitimately tell me I could be anything. I did everything your parents would tell you not to do. I've worked every day of my life. I had a job starting at 7 years old. I tell my grandkids that if you don't have a job, you're unemployed. I don't care how old you are. You need to start making money. I built my first business after I got out of the Navy. I joined the Navy at 18. Was a donut shop. I bought for $7,500. Eventually I built a company that I had 285,000 employees. And then I did a bunch of manufacturing companies. So my theories about all this stuff is I believe the most important thing you do is give somebody a job. It's number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. Get somebody to work. If you have parents without a job, it's a crappy life. If you don't have a job and you need money, it's a crappy life. So that's how I think about this. So here's how I just got back from Europe. I went to visit Denmark, Finland, and Estonia last week. And of course, all the political leaders ask about Donald Trump. And I said, in my opinion, there's two things that he's telling the world. Number one, if you want the American military to be your backstop, we're going to be your backstop. We're not going to be your front line of defense. You're going to have to put up your own money. You're going to have to put your men and women at risk before you're going to get American troops and American money. That's number one. Number two is the American worker is not going to be disadvantaged any longer. Now, I think part of it is going to be tariffs. Part of it is going to be just all the stupid rules that are out there that make it difficult for an American worker to be able to sell their products and services in another country. So, like, I believe in free trade. I'll go compete with anybody. I'm a business guy. Tell me what the rules are. I'll do my best to try to win. And I think that's what the American worker is like. But you can't have a policy where because of some regulation or some permit or some of this, some of that, you can't even sell our stuff. So I think that's what this is. So my approach is because I'm a deal guy. I've always done deals all my life. I told people, here's what I can do. If you'd like to do business with me, if you can't, that's fine with me. I understand. My approach would be, look, I want the American worker to sell more stuff. So lower your tariffs, lower your barriers, get rid of all of it. I'll give you an example. Probably the biggest employer in Vietnam called me 2 months ago, an American company. And he said, I'm scared to death of all these tariffs. He probably has more jobs in Vietnam. I'm sorry if I said it wrong. Vietnam than anybody else. I said, tell the Vietnamese government to get rid of every barrier there is. Because then if Donald Trump, he can't say that it's unfair to an American worker, so how's he going to do it? He can't talk about tariffs, he can't talk about barriers, he can't talk about anything. And why would they have any protection policies? So that's the approach I would take. So that's what that's how I explained it in Europe, because they all ask about it. And I also actually believe that we are slowly going to divide ourselves into two economies. We're going to have the bad guy economies of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, and we're going to have the good guys economy. The people believe in free markets and free trade and freedom and democracy. And that's what's going to happen. It's happening in a variety of ways slowly, but that's what's going to happen, in my opinion.
Right now, we don't actually have tariffs on Russia and Korea, although we have them on almost every other country in the world. But just to try to pursue that deal guide, there's another way of getting to a deal. There was something called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, under which Vietnam got rid of all of its tariffs, Japan got rid of all of its tariffs, and President Trump pulled us out of that. Hillary Clinton was also against it. There was a free trade negotiation with Europe, which was most of the way to a zero-for-zero deal. And both of those happened without $6 trillion being wiped off the stock market and every forecaster saying the unemployment rate is going to go up. Why would you encourage him to go that route?
Well, my encouragement is what I've talked to the White House, and I said, first off, say what your standard is, right? My standard is I want the American worker to sell their stuff. Don't put any barriers on us. We won't put any barriers on your country's workers. So that's what I would do. So I don't know if it's better to do a big deal like that or individual deals, but I would make it as simple as that. That happened just before I got to the Senate. Because it happened, right when Trump first came in 2017. The one thing that Obama did, which I pushed for really hard, it was the free trade agreement with Colombia. Mm-hmm. So for Florida, I was governor of Florida for 8 years. I did trade missions all over the place to try to get more jobs, and that was a big deal for us. It's to this day, now it's the biggest trading partner Florida has. Now, if they continue to elect people like Petro, it's going to go away. But right now, it's still, I actually think it's a bigger trading partner than Brazil now. When I left office, it was.
China's more complicated. We're both free trade when it comes to Europe, when it comes to Colombia. China's a competitor, a rival in a way that those economies aren't. How do you think we should be dealing with them? What should we be trying to get out of this? Them to reduce their barriers so we can sell more and be more integrated? Or try to de-link, and at what pace can we de-link?
So here's my theory about China. I don't want to go to war. I don't like war. I served in the military. I didn't go to Vietnam. I served during Vietnam. But I think the only way we don't go to war with China is if their economy is demolished. Because I think if they have the money, we're going to war. If Russia has more money, they're going to keep expanding. They're going to do more. It's just who Putin is and who Xi is, and maybe it's who their government is. So my belief is we should do no trade with China. We should say today, you guys lie, cheat, and steal. Think about it. They're creating precursors that kill 78,000 Americans a year with fentanyl. They've never complied with the World Trade Organization. They don't comply with the terms of most favored nation. They don't comply with the Trump trade deal. There's not one thing they've complied with. So now, if I did a deal with you and you lied to me, you think I'd do the second deal with you? No. I'd say, I don't want to do a deal with you. I don't trust what you're doing. I don't trust anything she says or does. I've got a friend in prison right now in China because he ran the newspaper in Hong Kong that talked about who she was. Jimmy Lai. He's been in solitary confinement for 4 years. That's what China is. So when I got to the Senate, I've been there 6 years now and 3 months, we bought 85% of the drones our federal government bought from China. Would you do that with your enemy? They decided to be our enemy. So it took me 5 years to just get the military not to buy them. It took me 6 years to finally our government, and now within 12 months, there will be no new Chinese drones licensed in this country. Our military still buys almost all of its drugs from China. Now that's stupidity. I mean, that is our logical, that's who's decided to be our enemy. This stuff's got to stop. Every time you buy anything from China, you're helping their government build a military to take away your freedoms. That's exactly what they're doing. They've already built, they have more ships than we do, they have more submarines than we do, they have a bigger military. They want to go to war with us. They want Taiwan. Taiwan is not part of China. Look at history. Taiwan was not, very small part of history was Taiwan part of China. But they're gonna do it. They're taking away the sovereignty, the Philippines. Those shoals are not they never were part of China, but they're doing that. So they are a despicable government. Not the people, the government is despicable.
Would we be paying a cost if we try to make them poorer as our strategy? And is that a cost that's worth paying for a greater good of national security?
I think long term. I mean, what's more important to me than anything else is my freedom. I mean, freedom of this country, the freedom to do what I want to do, that's more important to me than anything else. So the fact that, it's going to be difficult to decouple, yeah, it's going to be difficult to decouple. We don't have a choice, but we do not have a choice but to decouple.
I want to switch now to domestic issue. You were very fiscally responsible governor. I didn't look up the numbers, but since you've been in Washington, the debt's gone up an awful lot.
Yeah. Not a really good job,
and it's projected to be $20 trillion over the next decade. Yeah. And Congress just passed a budget resolution, a set of instructions that the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget says will add another $7 trillion over the next decade.
How do we get there?
What's going on? So, how do we do something?
So, as a business guy, the best thing is don't run out of money, right? It's really better, don't run out of money. Don't have to show up every day and have to beg for more money. That's not very smart. So make a profit. So when I ran for governor of Florida, I ran on one issue. I'm going to get you a job. You'll forget this about Florida. In 2010, how many people do you think moved to Florida? Or moved out? We had lost 800,000 jobs in 4 years, right? So the economy was really bad. It's one of the worst places in the country. And so I ran on getting 700,000 jobs. And so we actually got 1.7 million private sector jobs. I reduced the state workers by 15,000, from 127,000, I think, to 112. And the way I did it is I reduced the regulatory environment. I got rid of about 20% of regulatory regulations. I streamlined the permitting, and I cut taxes and fees 100 times. The taxes and fees were least important, the regulations and the permitting. Florida these states say they balance their budget. They balance their budget by borrowing money, okay? That's not a balanced budget in my mind. Balanced budget is you don't have to borrow money and you pay down debt. So I win the governor's race. I shocked everybody I was not supposed to win, either the primary or the general. So I have to put a budget out. So I never read the Florida budget. And so I said, what are our revenues going to be? And they said, at that point, they said that we should collect about $70 billion. And I said, so what's the anticipated spending? About 74. I said, well, then we're not spending 74, we're spending 70. And their eyes they said, how do you do that? I said, well, you spend 70. And so there's 4,000 lines of the budget. We went through every line in the budget. I had a written purpose for every line in the budget. And once we got to 70, we stopped spending. We balanced the budget. I balanced the budget every year, and actually I paid off a third of the state debt. The federal government's got to do the same thing. I'm on the budget committee. I've been on the budget committee for 6 years. We don't have budget committees about budgets. We had budget committee about interesting things like climate change or stuff like that, but we didn't talk about numbers. Most people in the Senate actually don't really want to talk about numbers. They're not, they're not business background. So where we are now, here's where we are. We've had think about this for a second. How much do you think in the last 5 years spending has gone up? Population is up 2%. How much is spending gone up? Give me a wild guess. What's your guess? 10%? What do you guess? Yeah, maybe 10. 15?
50.
53. 53. Now why? We went from spending about, I think it was like $12,000 or $13,000 a year to spending almost $20,000 a year. Now part of it was the pandemic. The pandemic is over, right? We're now running $2 trillion a year deficits. Now, how many of you are betting that interest rates are going to come down? They might. I'm not, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but here's some numbers to think about. I think we have to refinance. We only have a $28 trillion economy, right? We have to refinance this year $9.2 trillion of treasuries, and we have to sell another $2 trillion of treasuries, right? And right or wrong, do you think Russia's buying our treasuries? No. Think China's buying a whole bunch of our treasuries? Probably not. We have to buy those things, right? So we've got to balance the budget. Inflation will not go away. Interest rates are not coming down. So here's where we are. We are the way we should have passed the budget last year. We didn't even have budget meetings. So we're on a continuing resolution. We never even passed a budget for the year end September 30. So, but what we're talking about now is what we're going to pass, and really it starts for the budget starting October 1. So we're going to collect about $5.5 trillion. My goal is, if we went back to the Bill Clinton last budget, which was balanced, okay, and we raised it by population and inflation, and took today's Social Security and Medicare, we would have a balanced budget. Right? If we took Obama's last budget, we would be at 6.5 trillion of spending. And then, of course, Trump thinks he's going to get all these tariff revenues. So my goal is to get our spending down to the 6.5 this year, and then over the next 2 years, balance the budget. So that's what I'm working on. So what we started with the vote we just did is the beginning of the conversation. It takes 218 people to pass it in the House and 51 in the Senate. So all we've done is start the conversation. So here's what the fight's going to be over. And it's good. I think it'll happen. I think we'll get there, and I think we'll get there in July. And the reason is that we go on recess in August, and people want to go on recess. So we're going to put $175 billion up to deal with the border. Now, to give you a perspective how crazy that is, when I got up there in January 2019, we were arguing over whether the government was shut down over Trump wanting $1.7 billion to finish the wall. And now we're talking about $175 billion. There'll be $100 billion that will go in defense to plus up defense because they're worried about Russia. They should be worried about Russia, in my opinion, but primarily China. Then we've got to extend the Trump tax cuts, and some of them have expired. That will cost us if we do current policy, which means we don't have to come up with spending cuts for most of the Trump tax cuts. We still have to come up with we have to save $1.4 trillion over 10 years, and then I'm trying to reduce spending. So I'll give you some ideas on reduced spending. How many of you think that you should be able to get free health care if you don't want to even apply for work and you're able-bodied? You think you should get free health care anyway? I don't, okay? I think if you can't find a job, that's one thing. But if you don't want to look for a job, all right, you shouldn't get free health care, all right? How many of you think that we ought to pay more to the Medicaid program is a match program between the federal government and the state. Okay? For able-bodied adults that can work, the federal government pays 90%, And for somebody that's chronically disabled, they pay, in my state, 55%. Does that make any sense? It doesn't to me. We ought to be more worried about the person that's chronically disabled than we are about a person that could go find a job. So there's things that we can fix like that. There's a whole bunch. We spend about it's a little less, about $250 billion a year in payments to the wrong person. We ought to be able to cut that. So there's a bunch of things, but what we've got to do is we got to do what I did as governor. I think there's about 6,000 lines of the budget in the federal government. We got to go line by line and look at everything and say what's most important, because we can't do it all. Our programs ought to be programs for people that need a helping hand, not be on a program for the rest of their life unless they have to be. If you're disabled, that makes some sense. But if you just don't want to work, I lived in public housing. If you just don't want to even try for a job, you shouldn't get free housing. I don't believe it.
So if you were governor of the United States, we'd do all of that and we'd be in great shape, solve all the problems. The budget resolution that just passed, though, it only included $4 billion of spending reduction, which $4 billion is extremely small compared to everything we're talking about. What? Sorry, at least $4 billion.
Yeah. So the reason on the House side, they can say that they're going to cut X. They could say they're going to cut $500 billion. If they cut $499 billion, they can go forward with theirs. The way the Senate rules work, if you say you're going to cut a number, and let's say you're going to cut $500 billion in savings over 10 years, and you got $499.99 billion, the whole thing falls apart, just based on the Byrd rule. So what they do is, and this was, all my House friends, I've had so many meetings to try to explain this to them, because I agree with them, but the way the Senate rules work, you had to put in a number you guaranteed to meet. So I don't know where we're going to end up. I think, here's my prediction, right? Nobody knows, right? Because you got to get 51 votes. I think that if they're going to have a hard time if they don't have significant reductions in spending, because that's what the election was about. It was about the border and inflation. And inflation will go away if we don't have reduction in spending.
But in any scenario, I believe you're committing to raising that $20 trillion deficit, because once you just go to your current policy baseline, then you're already at $25 trillion, and you're just trying to stay at $25 trillion, not cut it from there.
So who knows?
Don't want to do too many numbers.
Yeah. So let's assume this is right. We'll have a better idea over the next 2 months. But the belief, without the tariff numbers, which no one knows, right? Trump thinks it's a gigantic number. Who knows what that number is? But let's say we're right that we'll collect about $5.5 trillion. Okay, if we can get down to the 6.5 and over 2 years get it to balance, then we would only be raising the debt ceiling $1 billion next year, right? And then hopefully last the next year, and over the next 3 years, then we wouldn't have to raise the debt ceiling at all. That's my goal. Now, I'll tell you what the fight's going to be, because we are going to have. It's important to Trump that he wants to make sure we don't have to come back for a vote on the debt ceiling while he's president. So he's asking for $4 trillion.
I'd be happy to get rid of the debt ceiling while he's president and while you're president after him and for the rest of time. While someone here is president after that.
So, the way I look at it is, if you're a fiscal conservative, it's just another way to force a conversation that nobody wants to have. So that's what I look at it as an opportunity to force a conversation about fiscal sanity.
So using the budget as a stepping stone to a conversation about what politics are like in Washington, I was involved in efforts under both President Clinton and President Obama to get bipartisan budget deals. One of them fell apart, but there's still something that came out of it, not nothing that came out of it. Biden, most of his stuff was party line, his biggest stuff was. This is going to be party line. Yeah. Tell me whether you think the two parties need to get together, how, and if you want to use Social Security, which is going to trust fund exhausted in a decade, you have a lot of beneficiaries in your state, as an example for how to talk about bipartisanship, what can be done?
So my approach as governor was I talked to everybody. every Republican, every Democrat in the Florida House and the Florida Senate was in the governor's office, and I met with them. We didn't agree on everything, but I would meet with everybody. I went through their, we have a budget every year, and the way the states, I don't know if all the states, but most states work, you have a year, like Florida, we're in 60 days a year, you have a budget, and then the governor has a line item veto. So everybody has the things that they care about in their district. So I met with everybody, and I figured out how to navigate to try to help as many people as I could. That's what we're going to have to do at the federal level. If you're deciding to run for office, do mayor, governor, and president, because it's easier because you get to drive the conversation. It's harder. You don't get to lead the conversation if you're in the Senate or in the House. Even the speaker and even the Senate president doesn't get to lead the conversation. The governor or the president does. It's going to take people finally having to say we want to solve these problems. When I became governor, there was a guy leaving as governor out of Vermont, and he told me, he said, "You cannot solve a problem that people don't believe is a problem. And then you need to come up with a solution, and you need to talk about it." I don't think Americans actually really believe that Social Security is a problem yet, or Medicare, or the budget. So they will. Like if you look at how Milei won in Argentina, finally people said we got to have some fiscal sanity, and so let me tell you, both parties have spent have run deficits. Bill, who you should respect as far as balance of budget was Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich, because they did it, and
I thought it was because I was a staff person then.
Yeah, and so who was Senate president then? Do you know?
What?
Who was Senate president when you guys balanced the budget?
Center.
Oh, Senate president back
then.
I'm
not remembering.
Would have been a lot.
Yeah,
probably. But look, they all came together. And it took it, and they didn't. Bill Clinton get everything he wanted. Gingrich didn't get everything he wanted. So. But they figured it out, and they got. I think in the Senate, we look back, they got 78 votes out of 100. Mm-hmm. That's what's got to happen. But it won't happen until the public decides it's really important. Now, the public is telling us that, but it's not registering. If you're the governor of a state, and I traveled the state. I shook hands as governor with probably 600,000 people. So if you didn't meet me, it was almost intentional when I was governor. I traveled every day. So people still call me the governor, and so I went to a Jimmy John's the other day to get a sandwich, and a young lady said, "Governor, I moved to Florida because of you." She says, "I'm from Indiana. I knew you were after jobs. I knew I could get a job." She said, "Everything's too expensive now." She says, "I got 2 kids now. I don't know ages, but let's say she's 30 years old." She said, "I can't afford anything." She said, "You got to get inflation under control." That's what the public wants. It's just there's a disconnect between what Washington is talking about and what the public wants. I think the election, I just was up this last cycle, and I can tell you the election was about the border and about inflation. That's what everybody had talked to me about. That's what's going to,
so inflation, where you have a 10% tariff on all the bananas, coffee coming into this country, we're not going to make a whole lot of bananas and coffee coming into this country. Every economist is forecasting inflation now of 3, 4, 5% this year. How's that going to work out, at least politically, if that's what happens?
My belief is we've got to get inflation under control. Now, I think inflation is generally tied to what Milton Friedman said, that basically if you dramatically increase your money supply faster than you increase your output, then you're going to have inflation. So I don't know what the tariffs will do to inflation, but first off, I think Jay Powell. I think, first off, Congress has failed to do its job to balance the budget. That's number one. Number two, I think Jay Powell has done a poor job by building up the Fed balance sheet. I think he caused a massive misallocation of capital. I think he's doing the wrong thing by paying banks to sit on reserves rather than lend you money to start a business. The Federal Reserve never before lost money. Like it's losing $100 billion a year right now. It's only because of Jay Powell. What he did during COVID of building the balance sheet from 4.6 trillion to 9.4 trillion made no sense to me. The Federal Reserve balance sheet is worth, if you sold the assets today, it's worth $1 trillion less than their liabilities. That's how he's $1 trillion loser, in my opinion. So I think inflation has got it. It's only get it under control if we balance the budget. So we'll see what the tariffs do.
I have a lot of thoughts on the Fed balance sheet. I would just refer you all to, there was an excellent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal 2 years ago by me that you can read. So
Are you
I'll spare you on the topic here. But this is a nice segue into executive power.
Is Jay probably a friend of yours?
I like him. And I like all the names.
He doesn't return many of my phone calls.
And I like the names. And I like.
He doesn't like any of my letters. Because he cannot explain. Think about this. He took the balance sheet to $9.4 trillion when Barack Obama got elected. Why was the balance sheet only $800 billion? Forever. And then under Bernanke, Yellen, and Powell, it went up to $9.4 trillion. Okay. They can't explain it. Not one of them can. There's not one Fed governor that can explain it.
One way in which you're much better than him is several times I've invited him to come speak here, and he's never agreed. Or to be more precise, he's agreed every single time, and then his chief of staff vetoed it.
Oh, really?
But anyway, we'll do that later.
He doesn't come see me either.
Let's talk about executive power. Several examples. The president was talking about having the authority to fire the Fed chair. So I guess to some degree, you don't like Jay Powell. Do you think Donald Trump would do a better job setting interest rates? The federal government's doing
I would like a new chair, but
an extraordinary set of things in terms of not spending money that Congress appropriated. This is after the previous president spent $500 billion that Congress had never authorized him to spend. I criticized him for that. Most Democrats cheered him on for it. And
we shouldn't be doing that. And
you fired heads of the FTC, and just in general has talked about potentially even ignoring courts. Where do you think we are in executive power in general, and then unitary executive in particular? Should he be the one who gets to tell each agency what to do, or can Congress give them the power to have some independence and insulation from him?
Okay, so I was a governor. So if you're the governor,
sure.
Yeah. So here's what if you decide to be the governor, you run for office, you win the governor's race, and then
there's only like half of them in here want to do that.
Okay, so I tried to talk every grade school kid in Florida into being the governor. I told them what a great job it was, give them some hope that they could do it. I said, if I can do it, you can do it. But here's what I believe: governors get elected, agency heads don't. Okay, so governors and presidents should run the agencies. It's their policies that run the agency. Now, I believe if you're the governor or the president or mayor, you follow the law. Okay, like I told everybody when I was governor, I don't care what the law is, we're following the law. If you don't like the law, there's a legislature over there. Go ask them to change it. So whatever the laws were in Florida, I said we're enforcing all the laws. Right? So that's what I believe. Also, I believe that you have to listen to the courts and you have to follow what the court decision is. Now, I think if you listen to what Russ Vought thinks, he's running the Office of Management and Budget. So did you watch the budget hearing when he testified?
I saw little bits of it.
Okay, so he believes the president has the ability, through empowerment, he believes the president has the ability not to spend money. Now, there's a lawsuit, and we're gonna find out. All right. Now, whatever that decides, he's going to have to comply with it. All right. So, now I'm not a. I could tell you more as governor what the executive branch powers are. Sean Spicer, I think he was on a military board, and
this was a break from precedent that Biden did this. I mean, you're about to say.
Biden fired him. All right, and it went all the way. My understanding, talk what Sean told me, it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the president had the right to fire him. Now, I don't know if that means everybody, right? Okay, because when the Supreme Court makes a decision, it's not broad, it's usually narrow. But logically, if you work for the executive branch, right, then the president should have the right to pick who works at the executive branch. When I was governor. Because here's what happens. If you hire somebody to run name agency. You run your health agency. And so you ran on a platform, okay? You got elected, then they should enforce your platform, right? But if they want to go off in another way, then they shouldn't work for you, right? Because you're the one who got elected. The public elected you, not them. But go back. I think the executive power has Congress has given up a lot of authority on executive power by not holding the federal government accountable, the executive branch accountable. The worst. I was looking it up the other day. Franklin Roosevelt. I think like Biden did like 40. Obama did like 36 a year on average. Trump did 55 in his first. You know what Franklin Roosevelt did? Like 340. So Lincoln only did 12 a year. And who knows what they were, right? So I think Congress, we got to get back to having 3 branches of government. But if you work for the executive branch, you work for the president. So.
And just one more question on that, then one other question, then I'm going to go to everyone here.
Answer?
Yeah. As governor, my guess is if I had watched you really closely, I wouldn't have seen you do 30 different things that went beyond where the law was at the moment, beyond where the norms had been, in the hopes that maybe you would prevail in court. I think that's a fair description of what this president's done. So isn't it not just the law, but also norms? And doesn't he seem to be taking norms that people complained when Biden broke them, rightly so, but then is doing even more than Biden did?
I think what my belief and what I tried to do as governor is you've got to bring people along, right? I mean, you've got a great pulpit. I mean, if you're a governor of a state, you can be in the news anytime you want. If you're the president, you can be anywhere in the world in the news anytime you want. So bring them along, explain to people what you're doing, and explain it. The way I would explain what we're doing on tariffs is I would explain, look, I care about American workers. They're not going to be disadvantaged. I want you, any of you, if you're going to have something, you ought to be able to sell it anywhere in the world. If they have a worker in that country who wants to sell here, who can disagree with that? Anybody think that's unfair? No. That's what we ought to be talking about. And then explain it. And you just got to take all the time in the world to explain things.
So my last question. You're here at Harvard University. The Wall Street Journal recently had an editorial that said Donald Trump tries to run Harvard. The subhead was his demands, go well beyond what the Constitution would allow. I want to understand what you think is a proportionate response and a consistent process response with what our president agrees, and I agree, is a problem with anti-Semitism, a set of problems on our campus, but how you deal with that in a proportionate way that is consistent with all the good and benefit that Harvard does for the world, if you think it does any.
I was here 28 years ago, and I was the only person in the room that didn't have a Harvard degree and was not going to get one. I went to junior college to start out, and I'm probably in the same position today. So here's what I think. First off, if you are going to get any money out of a government, all right, you have to follow all their laws. I mean, it's just the deal. You don't have a right to any money, right? So if you can't discriminate against people, period, right? You can't be anti-Semitic. You can't be anti, somebody's religion. You can't do that. You can't allow people on. And you've got to comply with the law. If you have somebody on your campus that is violating the law, all right, and the federal government asks you about it, you got to work with them, right? And it's the federal government. So I don't know about proportionality. I think we have got to dramatically reduce our spending. Right? We have got to figure out how to spend $2 trillion less per year. $2 trillion. Like right now, I think the numbers are, the last 4 years, we've collected about 14% of our GDP in revenues, and we're spending, I think, 22 to 24%. We cannot do that. So we've got to go through every line. So So I think if Harvard wants money out of the federal government, they've got to say, okay, so how do I comply with all federal laws? And if you can't discriminate, that's federal law. You can't be anti-Semitic. So, and you got to comply with if you have students here that are violating their visas, you got to comply with it. It's the law. So I might not like the law. There's a lot, when I was in business, there's laws that I didn't like, but I comply with all of them. So, and the other thing, I don't actually personally understand why higher ed doesn't pay taxes. They own buildings, they have restaurants, they make a profit. I've never understood. I understand why churches don't pay taxes, but I don't understand why higher education doesn't pay taxes. They should pay property taxes. If they make income, they should have income taxes. We all should be in this together. So.
Okay, it's time for questions. There's 4 microphones. And as usual, your name, a very brief question, and the thing that you ask is a question. And when you're going to move to Florida. We'll start over there.
Hi.
Thank you. I don't think it's, oh, there we go. Thank you, Senator, for being here. My name is Abiram. I'm a second-year student at the business school. Would love to move to Florida. But my question for you is more around the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. I broadly agree with your premise around China and other adversarial countries around trade. I'm just puzzled by the way in which we've approached trade negotiations with Mexico and Canada. It seems to be somewhat self-defeating. Even on a political lens, like the Liberal Party in Canada seems to be doing quite well as a result of that. So I'm just curious how you rationalize that treatment. And also, I used to live in Texas before, and the job benefit from NAFTA and USMCA is quite large. So I'm just curious why we give a lot of weight to places in the Rust Belt which lost jobs, but not places that have benefited from those kinds of trade agreements.
I could just impose on you to try to be as short as possible in your answer. You do whatever you want, but there's so many people here I would love to hear from.
So I'll give you just background. On Mexico, Florida is a big ag state. So if you guys eat tomatoes in the winter, there's a whole bunch of all the winter, the winter crops generally you're going to get from Florida, right? Mexico has been violating the law consistently. Howard Lutnick finally, I talked to him on Friday, and on Monday he changed it. He finally got rid of the suspension agreement on tomatoes, but they're dumping blueberries, they're dumping strawberries, they're dumping all sorts of stuff. They're not complying with USMCA. Okay, so the way my approach would be to say if we want actually real free trade, then just open the darn thing up and let there be real trade, but don't have limitations, and then comply with it. That means don't subsidize your industry. Okay, if we don't subsidize our industry. And so, but I can just tell you right now, Mexico has taken advantage of our ag industry forever. Canada doesn't let us ship in a whole bunch of things into Canada. We can't ship, I guess, wood in. There's a good book Jameson Greer put together of all the, country by country where we're getting taken advantage of. Now, my approach is, I'm a business guy, so I would have said, here, this is my problems, you got 90 days to fix it. Or don't do, and this is what I'm going to do. But maybe Trump could be, the way his approach might work better, I don't know. I'm not the president, so.
Hi, Senator, thank you for
Hi.
Is this on? Yeah. It's on? Yes, now it is. Hi, Senator, thank you for being here. My name's Andrew. I'm a senior at the college. I have a question about defense. You sit on the Armed Services Committee, particularly the Committee on Manpower. First, a lot of especially the Inside the Beltway news this week has been about turmoil at the Pentagon, so there's a little bit of a two-parter. First, do you have any concerns about Secretary Hegseth and many of the things that have come out in the last week about internal turmoil? And second, do you think that the administration's focus on, particularly on ideology within the armed services, is an adequate way of combating the recruitment crisis? And how would you potentially alter the policy to promote military recruitment? And should we have a robust armed service?
All right, so I like the military, and I enjoyed my service in the military. So even though I had, what do you think I got paid my first month? $144 a month. And I got married 2 years later, and I was making $332 a month, big bucks. So here's what I like about Pete Hegseth. All right, I think first off, I think all these jobs are hard, but here's what I like about it. He actually served in battle. All right, he led troops in battle. All right, he knows people that died. All right, He volunteered to go to war, right? He doesn't like war, right? And he knows the military's got to be the strongest military, and you cannot have anybody that's around you that's weak, right? So that's what I like about him. All right, I've known him. He's not a close friend, but I've known him because of he was on Fox, and so I did a lot of interviews on Fox over the years. So I've gotten to know him. So I like that about him. I do believe whenever you have a new administration, you're going to have a whole bunch of change. When I was almost every agency head I picked when I first became governor, I changed out within a year. And the reason is one, you're learning the job, and who you're picking. You might not be the best at it. They might not understand that you get to make the policy decisions, right? There are people, and I don't know anything about the facts of the people that have left, but they were accused of leaking. I can just tell you, it is the most frustrating. I don't know if you guys dealt with it. It is the most frustrating thing when you're the governor or you're the president of people leaking things out of your office because think about what you're trying to do. You try to get advice from all these people, right? And then people leak it to the press. What's going on? How does that help you? And so what you end up doing is you get a smaller and smaller group. That's not good for government. So I don't know those individuals. I don't probably never met them. But they get Trump gets to pick whoever he wants, and if he didn't feel comfortable with them, then that's don't worry. I don't think you should be surprised that there's change in government. And there isn't business. I ran a company with 285,000 employees. You change people out all the time because here's what happens. People get tired on the job. They don't believe in what you're doing. They want to go in a different direction. All these things happen. And if you got to have one direction, you can't have. Anybody that's leaving, they didn't get elected. One person got elected president. One. That's it. Donald Trump.
Next.
Hello. Hi. Is this microphone on? This microphone is on. Yeah, this is a bit of a dramatic microphone placement. But my name is Abby. I'm a freshman here at the college. And my question, we've talked a little bit about this, but it's about Social Security. You mentioned two very important things. One, that you think there is a disconnect between the American public on necessary reforms to the economy, but also the need to reform Social Security. But then you also mentioned that one of those reforms, if I'm understanding right, should be about if you are seeking a job, then you're eligible for certain benefits, and if you're not seeking a job, then you are not. But that can be very difficult to legislate, to actually write into law. So my question is, what specific reforms do you want to implement regarding Social Security, and how do you think we will manage the impact of those reforms? Thank you.
So number one is we should not cut, we don't have to cut the benefits of Social Security or Medicare. I have a bill that I have not been able to get one Democrat on that says we will not reduce the benefits, all right, of either one. We have the ability to fix both the programs. Now, so both those programs, you can improve them. Number one, with Social Security, we need to get the American workforce back to work. There's 50 million people in this country today, working age, that don't have a job. Now, some of them might be disabled. Some of them might be so rich they don't have to work. But whatever the number is, we need to get people back in the workforce. Okay, when they get back in the workforce, they're going to start paying into the Social Security program, and they're going to start paying into Medicare. All right, so we've got to get our whole country back to work. That was actually my slogan in my races: is "Let's get to work." So that's number one. Number two is we've got to make sure there's no fraud. All right. Now you saw all the stuff that Elon Musk said he found. We'll find out how much of that. Over time, we'll find out how many people were getting paid that they shouldn't. But we do know one of the offices that put out last year that just in the last 3 years in Social Security, there's $32 billion that they know of that went to the wrong person, and we didn't get the money back. There's $1 trillion just in the last 4 years that was given out overall in the federal government to people, and we didn't get the money back. They weren't entitled to it. So I think you should start with that, and then you start having conversations. This is the first time I'm the chair of a committee. I'm the chair of Aging Committee. So I'm having a hearing every 2 weeks, and all I'm trying to do, I don't get to do legislation in that committee. I'm trying to let's create the conversation, let's get everybody's ideas, but let's educate people that we do have to figure out how to fix Social Security. Now, there's a bubble. The baby boom population is causing the bubble. So in, 20 years or so, that bubble will be passed, so Social Security will be in a better position. But let's have a real conversation about how we do it. And there's lots of people that have different ideas of how to, some people want to raise taxes, some people want to change benefits. I think we're to start with, let's don't change anything, let's get everybody back to work and let's stop all the fraud and see where we are.
Great. We'll probably get to all 3 questions, so we'll do yours and try to do 2 more.
Thank you for coming, Senator Scott. My name is David Weidman. I'm a student at the Kennedy School here. I'm a Republican, and I'm from Orlando, Florida. I left before you were able to sign any of my FCATs, unfortunately. We're talking a lot about budget deficits tonight. In your opinion, legality aside, should the president be able to impound congressionally appropriated funds?
The courts will decide. So I don't, actually I haven't studied the law because I know that it's going to go to court and they're going to decide. So we'll find out. If you talk to Russ Vought, he's committed. He absolutely believes in it. I talk to Russ all the time. He believes it's going to happen. So we'll find out. I assume the courts will decide pretty quickly.
Hi, Senator Scott. My name is Gabriel Garrick. We met earlier. I'm originally from Venezuela. I proudly live in West Palm Beach, Florida now. My question is regarding Venezuela. What is it? I know you constantly work with Maria Corina Machado. You probably saved her life when she was kidnapped by Nicolas Maduro regime. What is the plan under the new administration to try to transition Venezuela to, Maria Corina being in power, and how can the U.S. support that beyond just sanctions? Would you consider a military intervention for that?
So I think here's what you have to do. You have to isolate Maduro. So you guys are all too young to remember apartheid in South Africa. So what I think really drove the change in South Africa, apartheid, was the whole world community decided that the pro-apartheid government was despicable. And we've got to do the same thing with Maduro. We've got to make sure no country other than maybe the bad guys deal with Maduro. We've got to make sure he can't travel anywhere in the world. He can't travel to the United States. You just saw Petro from Colombia can't come to the United States anymore. That's what we've got to start doing. We can't let any of his thugs travel to Miami. We've got to stop all the flow of oil, which Trump has started. It's going to end hopefully in May. There won't be, so that's where Maduro has his money. He gets his money to oppress the people, and then we've got to be vocal, and we've got to talk about what's happening. I think what Zelensky could do better, what I think Netanyahu is doing well, and what the opposition of Maduro can do better is talk about what's actually going on in these countries. And it needs to be in the media as much as possible. So I try to talk about it all the time. So that's what we could do. I believe if that happens, Maduro will be gone because he won't have the resources to stay in business. I think the Cuban government right now is in dire straits. They can't even get their electricity to work. So that's how it's going to change from within. It's not going to change, I don't think, through an invasion. And I'm optimistic.
Me too. Hopefully we'll see a change.
Well, I think it's going to start with Cuba, then it's going to go to Maduro, then it's going to go to Ortega, then hopefully we'll get a new president in Colombia. But the problem we've got now is Lula in Brazil even has taken away First Amendment rights. So we've got a lot of problems. The Malays, the shining star right now. So,
last question.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I'm a master's student studying public health, and I'm a nurse. So my question, you brought up Medicaid. Most of my patients are on Medicaid. They are working, for the record. I'm curious about, if you drop that match rate for the expansion population, a lot of states have trigger laws that would automatically disenroll patients like mine. So how are we protecting their jobs, if they can't afford to manage chronic conditions anymore? And how are we protecting my job as someone who would see a massive increase in uncompensated care?
Right. So here's actually what's happened. So since Obamacare came in, okay, and they started doing this, the 90% match for able-bodied, basically the states haven't increased. The states' revenues are way up, but their portion of the funding is flat. What they've done is they've all these games with these provider taxes and all, and so what's happened is it's become less of a partnership program. Okay, now it's a federal government program. So the states are going to have to pick up, do it. Because stop and think. Well, here's what's happened. I can remember this as a young kid. Before Medicaid ever came around, I had a little brother that had a disease in his hip. I lived in Kansas City, Missouri. My parents were very poor. They could not find one doctor in Kansas City, Missouri to take care of him. They had to find a Shriners Hospital 4 hours away. In many states, because of how crappy the reimbursement is for Medicaid, because it's expanded to cover all these people, and so many providers don't want to take it anymore, those same little kids, like my little brother, can't get care because they can't find a provider to take care of it. I think what we ought to be doing with Medicaid is saying, let's fund the program for the people that really need the program at an amount that these people actually really get care. And then we should expect the states to start doing their part. So I mean, there's another issue. Take a state like Massachusetts. Massachusetts is one of the wealthiest states in the country. Okay, they get basically the same reimbursement as poor states. Not as much, but why? Why aren't they putting up more of their own money? Right. So if you want, the federal government has spent its money. I mean, the spending levels for Medicaid have skyrocketed. It's the states that are not putting up their money. So we've got to just decide. We don't have unlimited resources, right? Where are we going to allocate our resources? My opinion, let's allocate the resources to the people that need the help the most. I think Medicaid ought to go back to the chronically ill, okay, and the kids that need it, and then say, okay, if we have extra money, how do we take care of more people? But I think we ought to be trying to subsidize everybody we can, knowing we have limited dollars. And then the other thing is we got to stop wasting money. We can't, like, we don't share. I was in the industry. The way the industry works is you get paid for providing a service, right? Which sounds really good, but why don't we get paid for making somebody healthier? Let's change. I mean, I'm excited what RFK and Mehmet Oz are talking about, and I hope they can do it. Let's make this country healthy again, so we don't have to spend all this much money on healthcare. And let's make sure, let's start paying people for taking care of people, right, and getting them healthy, rather than paying them because, and not worrying if they have a chronic illness and they never get better. Thanks. Good luck.
Great. Well, join me in thanking Senator Scott.
I return phone calls. If you're in D.C. and want to talk to me, by the way, on anybody that cares about healthcare, you should call Tom Power. Tom Power he's in my office. All he does is healthcare. If you want to talk about anything with regard to what's going on healthcare, anything that's being proposed, Tom is on it every day. That's all he does. So we generally have, if you want to talk to somebody on foreign relations, I have somebody in my office, that's all they do. I have people that only do military. If you have any questions, if you call my office, they'll respond to you. They're full service, and they love to have a conversation.
Great. That's terrific. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.